Hi, I'm Tammy and welcome back to my channel. If you're a beginner and you want to start sewing your own clothes but you're not sure where to start, this is the video for you. In this video, I'll be talking about some basic sewing techniques, tips and tricks to make sure that you're ready to start sewing your first project. Let's get into it. So all fabrics have a right and a wrong side. On some fabrics this can be much easier to differentiate than others because it will look visibly different. This jacquard has a really obvious wrong and right side. It's more faded on one side, which is why you know that is the wrong side of the fabric. This linen blend actually looks exactly the same on both sides, so in this case you can just use either side of the fabric. The right side of the fabric is what's going to be shown when you're actually wearing the garment, so that's why it's good to know which side is which. A selvage is the edge of a fabric that is created to protect it from unravelling and fraying, and here you can see exactly what that looks like. A seam is a line of stitching that joins two pieces of fabric together. Here's a great example of exactly what that looks like. After sewing a seam, you're generally going to want to finish the seam so it doesn't unravel. There's lots of ways to finish a seam, like using an overlocker, using pinking shears, or simply even using a zigzag stitch on your sewing machine. Back stitching is when you sew a stitch or few stitches and then reverse it and go back over those stitches to secure the threads. You're always going to want to do this at the beginning and the end of a line of stitches. A hem is an edge that is folded over once or twice and it's stitched down to stop the threads from coming loose, and it provides a really nice finish. Here's a few examples of the hems that I've sewn. Some of these are double folded and some of them are single folded. So when you're buying a sewing machine, you're going to want to make sure it's something that's geared to beginners. I actually have my machine behind me and it works amazingly. I bought it probably about 3 years ago and it's a Brother LS14 and I can't recommend it enough. It's a pretty inexpensive machine compared to what was on the market at the time. You'll want to get one that has multiple stitches and is easy to use. Also, when buying a machine, you're going to want to make sure it's pretty lightweight. In my case, that was really important because I didn't have a free desk all the time where I could put the machine out, so I had to make sure I could pack it away at the end of each sewing session, so that does make a big difference. You are going to want to see how heavy the machine is because that might make that whole process a bit of a ball ache. So it's always a good idea to have two types of scissors. I use one purely for cutting out paper patterns and snipping threads, and then I use these dressmaking scissors only for cutting out fabric. This is because cutting out paper with fabric scissors can actually ruin the blades, so it's always best just to have two separate scissors. There's lots of different types and brands of thread, but when you're just starting out, it's a great idea just to buy a bulk pack of threads that come with all these different colours. You can also buy more expensive ones like the Gutterman ones. They're better quality but not as cheap, and it's not really necessary. Seam rippers are a really basic tool that allows you to undo any mistakes you might have made. Basically use these to cut and remove any stitches and unpick seams. So you can buy lots of different types of pins. I need to buy one of those cool pin cushions to store my pins in because I currently have them in this little tin. But they're a great way for attaching patterns to fabric, which makes it much easier to cut out. You also want pins when you're holding a seam together before you actually go to your sewing machine and sew it. Ironing whilst you're sewing your garment is so important because it makes such a difference in how the garment's going to turn out. When I was a beginner, I used to always just forget ironing anything because I didn't think it was important, but it really does make a difference to how professional your piece is going to look in the end. You generally iron fabric before cutting anything out to remove any wrinkles, and then you also iron a seam once it's been sewn to help it sit nice and flat. Definitely recommend buying an iron. I just have a really basic iron from Amazon. It's not fancy, but it does the job. So all machines have a different way of threading the needle and threading the bobbin. I'm just going to be showing you on my Brother LS14. So we're going to wind the bobbin first. You'll want to place a thread here and then wrap it over around here. Taking a plastic bobbin, we're going to push the thread into this hole and keep hold of the thread and then place it into this section. Pressing the foot down, we're going to wind the bobbin, and then once it's done, we're just going to snip the thread. Then we're going to put this to one side and just focus on threading the needle. There will be numbered steps on your machine, and I promise this will become second nature to you once you do it a few times, but you're basically just going to want to guide the thread through the machine and thread the needle at the bottom. Then we're going to open up this section and place the bobbin inside. You'll need to guide the thread through this little bit, and you'll feel it snap into place once you pull it and it's in correctly. Then taking hold of the needle thread, we're going to turn the wheel and bring the bobbin thread up and out. And that's it. You can basically then slide the threads over to the back of the machine and keep them free from this area. So for your first sewing projects, you're going to want to make something a bit simpler so it's easier to wrap your head around different sewing techniques. I always recommend sewing free patterns when you're a beginner. I actually have a video all about 12 of my top free sewing patterns that I'll leave in the description box below. I remember one of the first sewing patterns I ever made was this peppermint maxi dress. It's a great free pattern that was simple to put together and I really loved the end result, so I can't recommend that enough. You could also sew a tote bag or a simple camisole. There's lots of different items that don't take too much time but teach you different techniques. Here's a few patterns that I recommend to start with. I hope this video helped demystify some basic sewing knowledge and how to start sewing your own clothes. You know, you just need to start sewing, start with one project and realise that the first project you make probably won't come out exactly as you envisioned, but at least it's a step in the right direction. Like this video if you found it helpful, and be sure to let me know in the comments section if you're excited to start sewing and maybe what your first project would be. I'll see you in the next one.